Hello there, everyone. I just want to start this video off with a really super quick introduction just to say so sorry that obviously there haven't been any videos for a while. I'm working on it, kind of. There's a lot going on right now. Some hectic stuff, life, you know how it is, but I'm always happy to make something for you guys, and I hope you enjoy. On to today's topic. We're talking about my favorite thing in the world. We're talking about Chrono Trigger. That's right, everybody, but not just Chrono Trigger, really. We're more talking about Chrono Cross. Now, as you all may remember, I made a video like, I don't know, a couple months ago or something, talking about kind of the rumors that we were getting a Chrono Cross remaster, remake, what have you, coming up, the NVIDIA leaks. I believed them, and it turns out it was absolutely true, as you probably know by now. As of the most recent Nintendo Direct, we have gotten an announcement for a Chrono Cross remaster, specifically the Chrono Cross Radical Dreamers edition. And as the title implies, to my shock, the game actually includes Radical Dreamers along with it. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but basically I want to go over kind of a very brief overview of it, because you probably know most of it by now. But more importantly, as a big fan, obviously, of the series, I kind of want to talk about some of the things we still might get in the Chrono Cross remaster, some of the things that it could indicate, and I want to talk about a big surprise we also got for Chrono Trigger, believe it or not, if you haven't heard, and just go briefly over some of this stuff, and then kind of talk about what the future of the series is currently looking like and how everything's shaping up. So starting off, obviously, we got the announcement for Chrono Cross, the Radical Dreamers edition. They are not remaking Chrono Cross, but it is mostly as people expected. It is an HD, remaster, port, whatever you want to call it, with some extra additions. The game releases on April 7th, so it's coming up pretty darn soon. Super psyched. Needless to say, I am incredibly excited. I did a whole reaction video. I went kind of nuts, not just because Chrono Cross is a great game and you should play it. You really should. It's flawed, but it's a wonderful little game. But also just because, I mean, to see Square Enix finally take notice and give love to the Chrono franchise. I mean, how can you not be excited if you're any sort of fan? I mean, not only does this show how much they do care and that we're eating good, but it also could indicate, some more stuff down the line. And it's great to know that, Square has been listening, regardless of whether or not they've been listening, whether or not this is the result of them having listened. It's great to see. It's wonderful to see. And as I said, Chrono Cross is a great game. It has some flaws though. And it turns out that we're getting more than just an HD, new coat of paint. They've announced that as of currently, what we do know is that they've announced some like new filters for the visuals, the ability to actually turn off random encounters entirely, which is really interesting because Chrono Cross, if you played it, is one of those few RPGs where you can actually kind of get away with playing the whole game without ever getting into a random encounter if you were to try that. So it's actually because of the way the level up system works, I won't get into it, it's actually a pretty feasible thing and honestly a pretty darn good feature. I know a lot of these RPG remasters get that sort of feature, but it's still honestly pretty useful for Chrono Cross in particular. That should be interesting, especially for speedrunners. They have announced a few other things, mainly for battles. Like I said, you can turn off the random encounters. You can speed up battles. There's now an auto battle function. You can now kind of use that like booster function where you suddenly gain like a super upper hand in battle. Pretty standard stuff, stuff we've seen for most of the, Final Fantasy remasters, but good to know. Good to know we have it. One cool thing in particular that I took note of was that you can actually turn off the new visuals. Now, that's something that a lot of these kind of remasters don't have. That's something that's really appreciated. You can revert it back to the original visuals. And Chrono Cross is a game that honestly is pretty darn gorgeous and still looks pretty good today, especially the backdrops. They are some of the prettiest 2D backdrops that you'll ever see in a game, honestly. But even though they still look good today, there is that, of course, now ability to get those new visuals. But if you are a purist, you can still revert them to the original ones. Unfortunately, you can't. First I thought this was the case, but you cannot turn off individual filters. Like, for example, there are new character portraits that look great, but there's also background filters, and there's also, other things. There's various visual upgrade filters and systems working in the background all at once, and you can't unfortunately turn off some of them. So that's a little unfortunate, because I've heard some people say that they think the 2D backdrops don't look as good. But even though that's the case, I think no one will argue that the character portraits are looking damn good. So it's unfortunate that you can't have one or the other, but hey, it's cool. You can turn one on, turn one off. Good stuff, all good stuff. They haven't made any sort of indication of whether or not there is more to come. I don't know if that will be the case. I did mention in my video over the speculation of a Chrono Cross remaster that I personally would like to see a little fine tuning to the summon system and the field system. I won't get too far into it because it's not important for here, but there is a system in the game where you can use different elements to change the field color, and you can use summons if you have certain. But basically, in the original game, summons kind of rarely ever happened, and they felt very afterthought-ish, and the field system in general was just kind of flawed, and I would have loved to have seen a tinkering with that. It is possible it still has been tinkered with, because it might be the sort of thing that is kind of too hard to convey in marketing, especially since they clearly want new players to this, and it doesn't matter to new players. So it is possible that there are other fixes behind the scenes. That's entirely possible. We've seen remasters of other games do it. For me, I always bring up the Zelda remasters. Every time Nintendo advertises these Zelda remasters, people get worried because they don't announce certain things, and every time it happens, when the games actually then come out, there are way more things that are improved in the remasters that weren't even mentioned. Wind Waker had a ton of them, for example, but who knows if that will be the case for this. I hope so. I do hope we get some fine tuning to the battle system. Even if we don't, super cool to see. Chrono Cross is great. One of the more interesting announcements for what they're going to be changing and quote unquote improving for this version is kind of reworking the soundtrack. They said kind of fine tuning the soundtrack. I would assume it means higher audio quality, but who knows? A little worrisome, because Chrono Cross's soundtrack is believed by many to be one of the best, if not the best ever in a game. It's that good, and that people love it that much. It's really well received, Yasunori Mitsuda. And they've announced that they're kind of gonna do something to that. Hopefully nothing, dramatic. Hopefully it's just oh yeah, the audio quality is improving. I'm not entirely sure what that means. And I've always said, when I bring up music stuff, I don't know music that well. I don't like to talk about things that I don't have a good understanding of. And I'm not a music person. I love music, but I don't know it, So if anyone knows, feel free to kind of give your input on that. But what I do know, what I can talk about for sure, is that Yasunori Mitsuda is apparently composing a new track for this version of the game, which is super interesting to me. That doesn't always happen kind of with these RPG remasters. A good case I can think of is the Ocarina of Time remaster, where they actually made that whole new, for the 3DS, where they made that whole new track for the credit theme. And I would assume that's what's happening here, because obviously it's a whole new team working on the HD version, so you need separate credits for that thing usually. So I would assume that maybe he made some sort of new track that's going to play for that. But, you know, who knows? Either way, like, Sea of Stars now with Yasunori Mitsuda and a new Chrono Cross track by Yasunori Mitsuda, that in itself is kind of almost just as exciting as the game itself. Really, really exciting stuff. But if we're going to dig a little bit deeper into this, now in that video about the speculation, this is where we're going to get a little bit more tinfoil hatty. So warning on that. But I've taken kind of special note of the marketing for the game. Now, one thing that is really awesome is it has its own Twitter page, and it really is, it's great. It's got a lot of love. There's a lot of references to it. They clearly know and love the game they're working on, so good on that. It really doesn't feel like half-assed here. It really feels like this is being done with love, and I'm very, very happy about that, because Chrono Cross deserves it. I'll mention a little bit more about the Twitter, because there is something interesting about the Twitter, but mainly I want to talk about kind of the marketing for the game at the moment, and in particular online, like the posts from social media, mainly Twitter. But so in order to advertise the game, they're showing obviously some new screenshots to show, you know, the improved visuals and stuff like that. I have noticed that they are putting a very specific emphasis at times. This is on not only their multiple Twitter posts, but it's in the trailer. It's in the page for the game. The actual, like, there's a page for the game where you can see all the details about the remaster. An emphasis on Guile. Now, I've talked about this in my last video, but Guile is kind of a very interesting case for Chrono Cross and the entire Chrono lore, what have you, what word you want to, but basically, I'll say this again briefly, because I'm sure there are still some people who don't know. Guile is a character in Chrono Cross, a game with 42 party members. That's not an exaggeration. There are literally like almost, I think it's 42. And Guile is a character who is optional, who you can travel along with you, and he's a wandering magician who doesn't seem to know much about himself, but he looks eerily familiar to a certain Chrono Trigger character, and as it turns out, he was originally supposed to be Magus, indeed, from Chrono Trigger, because Chrono Cross is a sequel. And the idea was scrapped because there's already too much going on with the game. So the idea was scrapped, but later kind of, in my opinion, retconned by the Chrono Trigger DS secret ending, which basically all but confirms that Guile is Magus. However, as the game has never been updated since then, Chrono Cross, that is, even though, yeah, you can basically say that Guile is Magus with like memory loss, which is what happens at the end of Chrono Trigger DS, it's not at all at any point obviously in the original Chrono Cross confirmed, stated, or anything. So it's not really a spoiler even to say it, because if you play the game, you wouldn't know anyway. But I guess Square just took the interesting opportunity with the Chrono Trigger DS re-release to further link it into Chrono Cross, and there are other additions in the Trigger DS version that do link the game over to Chrono Cross further. I guess they felt that was important. The PS1 version did it as well. But bottom line is, in my opinion, that's basically what it is. That is the case. But obviously, the question is, with a revisit, with a remaster, this is their chance, if they want to actually do something with it. Some sort of, who knows, whether that comes in the form of new dialogue, a mandatory new cutscene, a new secret ending. Maybe that's what Yasunori's music was used for. Very slippery slope, like, stuff to think about. Don't get too excited. But it is the possibility. Like, this is their opportunity to do that sort of thing. Perhaps if, say, they had some sort of plan with the Chrono series going forward, this would be the perfect opportunity, obviously, to then dive deeper into that and give some sort of confirmation. I mean, they did it with Chrono Trigger on the DS. So is it impossible? No. Personally, I think it's safe to assume for now that there probably won't be anything new or any sort of interesting developments with Guile's character, where they kind of, implement the magusness into, for lack of a better way of putting it, into it. But it is something that's really interesting to think about, especially since they are very blatantly, in my opinion, putting a spotlight on Guile's character in the advertising for Chrono Cross, the Radical Dreamers edition. He's in like several screenshots that they're showing, and I want to remind you all, the game has 42 party members. So picking just one out of those, they really are doing that, like, wink wink nudge nudge, we know what we're doing kind of thing, which, again, I don't necessarily think it means anything. I don't necessarily think it's a hint that we're going to sort of get some sort of new development in the Chrono Trigger story with Guile being Magus or anything like that. But at the very least, it is kind of cool to have them just kind of be like, we know. Don't worry. We know. It's just that little wink at us, which, if anything, at least kind of tells me that it's still something they think about. It's still something they know darn well is, still cooking and still, like, kind of out there. And mind you, Guile is an optional party member, so they really didn't have to, but there's a huge emphasis on him. I just think it's interesting. If anything, I think it's incredibly cool that they are calling so much attention to it. Like I said, Chrono Trigger DS released with new stuff that linked the two games together. Is it possible that Chrono Cross, the Radical Dreamers edition, will do something to perhaps hint or move us into the next chapter of the Chrono series? Probably not, but it's worth thinking about at the very least. I don't want to talk too much about it because I don't want to get people too excited, but it is what it is. As I mentioned, it also is going to include the Radical Dreamers game, which is incredibly cool. Never, ever expected that. I kind of always thought if you were to do the ultimate, like, kind of simple version of a Chrono collection, you would want to include Cross, Trigger, and maybe Radical Dreamers, and they did it. How cool is that? It's so cool that they show love for such a forgotten title. If you haven't heard of it, don't blame yourself, because it's just kind of been forgotten to time. Like I said, it was basically their first attempt at what Chrono Cross would be. The game was developed only for, like, a special Super Famicom peripheral called the Satellaview. It literally, like, used satellite. It's weird. It's not important to get into, but and only released, I think, in Japan. I might be wrong about that, but we never got it. So it's a text-based adventure. So it's very different. It's not what you would expect. Don't go into it expecting any sort of, like, thing similar to Cross or Trigger, but it's very interesting. It's like a relic of our time, and it's great to have it back. I think it's worth playing, and I'll be interested to see what people think. It's neat. It's neat. So cool that is on there. Again, just showing all that love. I love it. But it turns out the love for the Chrono series did not stop there. I was almost going to make this video like right after the Chrono Cross remaster was announced, and I'm glad I waited because something perhaps even more interesting just happened about 3 days ago. Out of the blue, completely out of nowhere, Chrono Trigger on Steam it received an update. It received a software update. Now, I just want to kind of clarify here. Chrono Trigger on Steam, which was originally released to like much disdain because of kind of some issues with it, it's since been fixed up super well, has not had an update for about 4 years. And those updates were just the updates that kind of just improved it and made it like a good version of the game that I do recommend. But out of the blue, completely out of nowhere, we get an update. It wasn't huge, but the new update added in the ultra widescreen support, so new resolutioning. It added in quicker auto battles so that you can, roll through auto battles a little quicker. And it also added in some features into the cell phone version, the smartphone version, that were in the Steam version but weren't in that one. If my memory serves, the gallery is one of them. Just some extra things, but not too much like going on as a whole. But out of nowhere, like 4 years. And we get this, of course, when Chrono Cross is heating up and ready to release. Now, the obvious kind of answer is, I think, probably just, Chrono Cross is hot right now. We gotta sell the game. Let's give Chrono Trigger some love. I mean, while we're looking at that, why don't we just beef up the Chrono Trigger Steam version a little more, and it'll raise a little more hype and maybe get us a few more sales. That's the obvious answer to me, is just like the timing is right. But of course there is the much more interesting outcome that this means that we are gearing up for some sort of new port, perhaps some sort of new port that requires a new resolution. I don't know, like maybe a Switch version, perhaps. It's possible. I don't know. A lot of people kind of have figured that we might just get it for the Nintendo Switch Online for the Super Nintendo. Personally, I don't want that outcome. I want the DS port on Switch. I think that'd be great. Or God forbid, some sort of, HD 2D or some sort of like full remake or revisiting of Chrono Trigger or sequel. Who knows? The bottom line is, to take away from this, in my opinion, whether like regardless of what this ends up meaning, is personally, as someone who's like, Chrono Trigger means the world to me. Chrono Cross I just love the Chrono series obviously so much. I am just filled with so much glee over how much love the series is getting right now. Even if it might seem small to other people, it's really heartwarming for me, because it's not a series. It's a series that's beloved and everyone pretty much agrees it's incredible, Chrono Trigger, but it doesn't get too much love or too much attention from the people who can actually, do something with it often. So things have never honestly looked better for the Chrono series at the moment, in my personal opinion. And regardless, I don't want to get people like too hyped up, but personally, I truly believe that we are on a course for a full resurrection of either the Chrono series or at least some sort of revisit to Chrono Trigger. I really do. I think Chrono Cross could have easily just been like the testing the waters. We'll try it with the less beloved title, first, see how that goes. But also, obviously, the more obvious answer, to indicate sales. And so I really hope, and I urge everyone who wants this sort of thing or who just loves the Chrono series, support the Radical Dreamers edition of Chrono Cross. And the best part is I can say that with like no issue because it looks great. It looks like it's being done with a lot of love, and Chrono Cross is great. It deserves to be experienced, no doubt about it. But if we support this enough, I think we all know what's coming next. So, you know, maybe, I mean, strike while the iron is hot. This is it. Like, this is a big, like, possible pivot point for the Chrono franchise. It's never looked better. Not that it looks amazing or like it's a sure thing by any stretch of the means, but this is about the best it's looked for a long time for something. Something could already be in the works. We don't know. I mentioned before how I was going to come back to the fact that Chrono Cross, the remaster, has a Twitter and that there was something interesting about it. Well, yes, it does have a Twitter and it's awesome. But interestingly enough, it's not titled what you might think. It's not titled like Chrono Cross Twitter, Chrono Cross Radical Dreamer, Chrono Cross Game, whatever. It is just called Chrono Game, which, you know, is a little interesting, something perhaps to think about. It does not specify cross exactly. It is just the prefix chrono, perhaps hinting that it will be used for other means. Who knows? It's getting interesting. It's just getting interesting. I don't want to say it's a sure thing on anything. I just personally am feeling pretty optimistic. I think that is something interesting to think about. Hopefully it indicates something, but it's super exciting to think about. I really think like we could be on our way. I really do. Whether that takes the form of, you know, some sort of remake, some sort of just like DS port, I think pretty much we always end up with a good result out of this. I'm sure many people wouldn't want like a Steam port. I'd be on consoles. I'd be okay with that because I actually think the Steam port is very solid. The only problem the Steam port has ever really had, honestly, is just like occasional crashes. And I haven't tried the new update as much, like too much to kind of see if they fix that. There was no mention of it. But you never know. Maybe they did fix it. That would be awesome. That's kind of what it needed fixing the most. It's also still strangely missing one of the anime cutscenes, the one with Robo and Affix, the one where they meet Robo. I have no idea why. I can't figure that one out. I can't imagine it has something to do with like rights or anything. But for some reason, the Steam version just doesn't have one of the anime cutscenes. It's not a huge deal, but it's weird. It's just weird. I don't know. And it's still not there. I don't know. But the bottom line is things are looking great. Things are looking great. Regardless, just getting a Chrono Cross remaster is awesome. I'm so excited. I will definitely be picking it up. I urge everyone else to support it in any way that you can. And let's hope that like we're on our way for something pretty awesome soon. I mean, regardless, we kind of are with the Chrono Cross remaster, but I'm excited. I am super excited. What do you guys think? Are you excited about the Chrono Cross remaster? Are you excited to play Radical Dreamers for perhaps your first time? What are your thoughts on Chrono Cross? I know it can be a little bit of a divisive title. And what do you think is going to happen with the future of the Chrono franchise where we're at right now? I would love to hear. It's always great making one of these. I hope you enjoyed. Hopefully we have something to talk about with this again really soon. Fingers crossed. I'm excited. I'll see you all April 7th for the Chrono Cross re-release. Yeah, it's a good time to be a Chrono fan. Bye, everybody.